Okay, so just to introduce the clip that we're about to watch, these are from our high school interns from our last discussion, the part one of this Black and White Spaces um, series or conversation that we had. Our high school interns at the Afrimerican Academy, they discussed some of their challenges that they faced at PWIs. So, Marlon, if you can go ahead and start the video, then we'll just take it from there.
Like I was playing the role of the educator. I had to give like cultural context in a very specific class. Actually, in one of the books that was on one of the previous slides, I was giving cultural context to cultures I wasn't even a part of. You know, I wasn't myself well educated on, and so it was definitely difficult for me. And that's why, again, I had to speak up for myself.
So she talked about this feeling of of always, I guess, serving as a cultural ambassador. So I want to ask you all, panelists, and also to our viewers, do any of you share in these sentiments? Did you ever have any educators put you in a position where you felt that you had to serve as a cultural ambassador for all Black people? And do you ever feel invisible or unheard in your classrooms or schools? And also, if you can share how being at a HBCU or mostly Black spaces kind of provide you with this sense of cultural comfort. So I'll just start with KJ.
So I can remember there have been times where I've felt like I've had to be a cultural ambassador, but in the moment, I never thought of it that way. I'm a very willing teacher, so I have been someone who was very, willing to say, oh, well, my hair does this because of that, or, oh, okay, well, this is a cultural thing. So I didn't necessarily see in that moment why it was an issue. However, speaking on the HBCU portion, I think that going to an HBCU kind of gave me the opportunity to not have to focus so much on explaining myself. In high school, I had a very mixed group of people that went to my school. So it was culturally diverse. And in certain situations, I had to explain myself. Well, at my HBCU, I had friends who looked like me, dressed like me, and for the most part had hair like me and did their hair like me. And so it definitely gave me that ability to, like you all said, breathe. It gave me the ability to kind of not question a lot of the things that I did, which helped me to grow into, I would say, the woman that I am today. It made me a bit more secure in my Blackness.
Thank you, KJ. I would definitely echo that. The HBCU served as my foundation for being comfortable in my skin, for being comfortable in my culture, and in the way that I'm able to articulate what those different parts of my culture are. In terms of a cultural ambassador, it's never usually the put you on the spot type of stuff, but there may be cultural or diversity conversations that's happening in the classroom, and you get the subtle
right.
And especially now being in a predominantly white space, you notice it, right? You see when people are looking at you for certain types of questions, especially when you begin to articulate the diversity initiatives in other spaces. And now you somehow become the martyr for diversity, inclusion, and all of the things. But I have no issues with educating. I have no issues with calling out people. I have no issues with saying what needs to be said. If we can foster a space where we have mutual respect and it's a conversation, absolutely.
I have had educators put me in that position. In high school specifically, I can think to being one of maybe 3 Black people in like AP courses, and they would constantly calling us for example, like AP history, we're always called on to answer questions related to Black history. And even now, transitioning to my graduate program, very similar to Candace. Well, kind of on the flip side. So I had people actually call me out. I'm the only Black person in my cohort. So like our diversity courses, I would be expected to be the voice for Black people. And I've also had professors who asked me to be like a cultural guide for my cohort. I'm like, that's not my responsibility. I don't mind helping, but again, I think that there's a responsibility for other people too, right? To understand and research these things. It's not just my responsibility to speak on behalf of all Black people, because as KJ mentioned earlier, we're not a monolith. And so I think that expectation is very different versus like me wanting to support and help. And so sometimes I have been put in those uncomfortable situations, and I will respectfully decline to speak on behalf of all Black people. I've had both kind of like those situations where I've been put on spot, but also willing to help and support. I think it just depends on where, I guess, like the intention behind asking me to serve or to help individuals in that situation. But again, for me, it's like when I do have that opportunity, is making sure that I'm very clear about Black people are not, all of this is not generalizable, right? Like we're not monoliths, and we all have very unique experiences, and that expands across other cultures as well. And so just wanting to be mindful when I am put in that position and I am willing to speak on some of our experiences.
Well, I didn't really have too many educators put me in that position, because I think if they were putting me in that position when I came from Nigeria, I probably didn't know any better. I've never had a problem with educating or feeling that I have to educate or explain, because they're one of my, I guess, unique positions is that I'm explaining on both sides, is what I'm trying to say. So to Africans, so while I do explain to African Americans, oh yeah, this is how it is in Africa, I also have to, deconstruct some of the the stereotypes that Africans believe about, Nigerians. About African Americans that are not true. So I feel like I educate everybody, so therefore I don't really feel any issue with educating white people or Black people, right? There's some people that just do not know. I find it now very annoying, because I work this, when I work in the Boston public school system, and so funny enough, in a very long time since I worked a lot for myself, this is probably the more diverse community that I'm in. But normally it's all Black, because I'm used to being in an all Black environment. So this is very diverse for me, being with some white folks and having to work with them up close. I've never really had that experience, well, at least not as an adult. So that part is very challenging, because I guess I don't do that thing where you think what they think first before I talk. I just say what I have to say. I don't cowtail. I can be aggressive and assertive at the same time, be respectful. I don't, a lot of tools I have in my tool belt that I always find that they're looking at me as, wow, you're a smart one. That's how I always feel like they're looking at me, like or you're different. You're not, they always look at me like, and I know, like I'm some sort of, like I'm breaking the monolith that they thought people of color were. And I can see it on their face, because they go, oh my God, like this guy is not your typical whatever they had in mind. I think those are my major experiences, I'd say. But it is difficult trying to, because as a man in Nigeria, I'm trained to, handle business, go for perfection, be strong at all times, be a rock for my community. So when I exhibit these things, I don't expect you to look at them as, oh, that's pretty nice that you can do that. Like I'm I don't know how to describe it, but they make you feel as if you're very articulate, like you're somehow special because you exhibit normal human behavior. And I find that in itself, or like they're impressed. They did not expect that from my kind. And so that's where I think most of the challenges come, because I make sure sometimes that they know that I'm not pleased with what they're saying, and I address them as such, not rudely, not trying to pick a fight, but just to let them know on the back end that I disapprove. I take that entitlement to disapprove of the way you're speaking, and I just attribute it to your ignorance on matters of people of color. And I think that's a very strong way of looking at it, because in a way, like, who are they? How can anybody judge me as a monolith? And I always find that to be quite offensive. So
I think on my side, me personally, at my PWIs, I don't think I've ever directly had any experience like this where I had to serve as a cultural ambassador. But I would say that when I started working, like my first job after undergrad, I was working in it was a mostly Black and brown school, but a lot of the teachers were white women primarily. And I remember one girl in particular. She was a young Black girl. I think she was in 5th grade or so. And I think one day she had made a comment about how she felt that her hair wasn't beautiful, or that, because she's a dark-skinned girl, she felt that she wasn't beautiful. And, she said that to the white teacher, who then looked at me like, kind of like what Candice, you were saying earlier, as far as like that look that they give you, like, are you going to speak up? That kind of thing. And for me at that point, I was like really young. Like it was my first job really. And I just kind of, I'm not a generally outspoken person. And then I tend to process things, like even, this conversation we're having right now, like it doesn't come naturally for me. I have to like literally have a script. Marlon knows that very well. But, even like kind of processing my thoughts, like the conversation was very awkward and uncomfortable. And I personally didn't say anything in that moment because, one, I don't like being put on the spot. So it's kind of like, she was an older professional, like an older teacher who has been in this kind of setting, knows the student very well. So I would have expected her to say something affirming to that child. But the fact that she looked at me and then I looked at her, so, like none of us said anything. So, that was a missed opportunity that I definitely regret.